The $6 Million Man turned the idea of a cyborg hero into one of the defining legends of American television. 5 seasons, 108 episodes. And to this day, that electronic sound over slow-motion footage sends you straight back to the 1970s. Did you know that one of this show's actors became the first person in television history to play the same character on 2 competing networks, ABC and NBC, at the same time? Did you know that the show's lead star lost both his parents before he was 2 years old, grew up in a family that took him in, and became one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood? Did you know that one of the show's key actors won both an Oscar and a Tony, recorded the original voice of HAL 9000 for 2001, A Space Odyssey, and appeared in the series only once in the very first pilot movie? Let's find out what happened to the people who gave us this unforgettable world of bionic heroes. Where are they now? What became of them? Some of the answers will genuinely surprise you. Number 1. Martin Balsam as Dr. Rudy Wells. Martin Balsam appeared in the 1973 pilot movie for The $6 Million Man as Dr. Rudy Wells, the scientist who rebuilt a broken test pilot into a man of the future. Balsam was 53 at the time, and it was a role he took at the height of a remarkable career, one whose full scope most fans of the show probably never realized. Because Martin Balsam was an Academy Award winner, Best Supporting Actor for 1,000 Clowns, 1965, a Tony Award winner on Broadway. The man audiences remembered as Detective Arbogast in Hitchcock's Psycho, 1960, as a juror in 12 Angry Men, 1957, From Breakfast at Tiffany's to Catch-22 to All the President's Men, dozens of films that belong permanently to the American canon. Here's something most people don't know. Balsam recorded the original voice of HAL 9000 for Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey. Kubrick ultimately replaced him. His reason? Marty sounds too American, an Oscar-winning actor, cut from 2001. Only in Hollywood. He was married 3 times. His second marriage to actress Joyce Van Patten produced a daughter, Talia Balsam, who became an actress in her own right. In his later years, he worked extensively in Italy, where he was genuinely beloved as a star of the poliziotesco crime genre. Every bit as celebrated there as he was back home. On February 13, 1996, Martin Balsam died of a stroke in Rome. He was 76, the man who first embodied Dr. Wells and set, Steve Austin's story in motion slipped away quietly, far more quietly than he deserved. The Oscar, the Tony, Broadway, Hitchcock, Kubrick, and one pilot movie where it all began. Number 2, Darren McGavin as Oliver Spencer. Darren McGavin appeared in the 1973 pilot as Oliver Spencer, a cold, calculating government official who made the decision to invest $6 million turning a dying pilot into a weapon. McGavin was 50. His Spencer was nothing like the affable Oscar Goldman of the regular series. This was a man who saw Austin not as a human being, but as an asset. What most people never knew about McGavin, he had almost no conventional upbringing. As a teenager, he ran away from reform schools, lived for a time with a Native American community along a river, and slept under a pier in San Francisco. A man who built himself entirely from scratch, and meant it literally. His signature role came as reporter Carl Kolchak in Kolchak, The Night Stalker, 1974 to 1975, running almost simultaneously with the bionic shows. 2 hits at once. But immortality came from an entirely different direction. The Old Man, the narrator father in A Christmas Story, 1983. That film plays every Christmas across America, and his voice is the whole thing. Quote 1, "That's him." In the 1990s, he earned an Emmy nomination for Murphy Brown. On February 25, 2006, Darren McGavin passed away at 83. His Spencer appeared in only that one pilot, but he was there at the very beginning of Steve Austin's story. And A Christmas Story keeps going. Number 3, Alan Oppenheimer as Dr. Rudy Wells. Alan Oppenheimer was the second actor to play Dr. Rudy Wells, and the one who brought the character into the regular series. The first 2 seasons are entirely his. He was 43 when he took the role of the scientist who made Steve Austin something new. His Wells was warm, slightly paternal, And that's exactly how viewers from those early seasons remember him. But most kids who grew up in the 1980s didn't know Oppenheimer by his face. They knew his voice. Alan Oppenheimer is Skeletor in He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. He's Ming the Merciless in Flash Gordon. He's Vanity in the Smurfs. He's Falkor, Gmork, and the narrator in The Never-Ending Story, 1984. His voice acting career is an empire of iconic characters spanning multiple generations. One great footnote: when Oppenheimer left the show for another project and was replaced by Martin E. Brooks, the two men later laughed about the symmetry. Years earlier, Oppenheimer had stepped into Brooks's role in a Broadway production. Hollywood is a small world. In March 2025, at 94 years old, Oppenheimer was unable to attend a fan convention due to pneumonia. In 2026, he turns 95. He is the living patriarch of a golden age of American television. Still here, still part of this world. Number 4. Martin E. Brooks as Dr. Rudy Wells. Martin E. Brooks was the third and final actor to play Dr. Wells, and the one who held the role the longest, from season 3 through the end of the series, plus all 3 reunion movies. When he first appeared on screen in 1975, he was 49. His Wells grew more essential with every season. Not just the scientist, but the moral center of the entire bionic universe. What almost no one knew about him: his real name was Martin Baum. He served in the 11th Airborne Division in the Pacific during World War II and was awarded the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. After the war came college, Broadway, Arthur Miller's An Enemy of the People, a Tony nomination, a genuine theatrical foundation before television ever entered the picture. Together with Richard Anderson, Brooks made television history, the first actor to play the same character simultaneously on 2 competing networks, ABC and NBC. It happened in the fall of 1977 and had no precedent in the industry. In 2014, at 88 years old, Brooks released a music album called A Life Filled with Love, recordings of songs he had written back in the 1960s and quietly kept with him for decades. Because he was also a musician and the author of 2 novels, and a playwright whose work was once considered for Broadway. On December 7, 2015, Martin E. Brooks passed away of natural causes in Studio City. He was 90. Lindsay Wagner wrote on her website, "What a joy it was to know him and to work with him. The last Dr. Wells turned out to be one of the most genuinely remarkable people the show ever had." Number 5. Richard Anderson as Oscar Goldman. Richard Anderson is the voice. That voice from the opening of every episode: Steve Austin, astronaut, a man barely alive. We can rebuild him. We have the technology. We can make him better than he was. Better, stronger, faster. He spoke those words every week, and he played Oscar Goldman, director of the OSY, and arguably Steve Austin's closest friend. Anderson was 47 when he stepped into that role in 1974, carrying it simultaneously across 2 series. It was Anderson and Brooks who made history as the first actors to play the same character on competing networks. A BC pushed back hard. They didn't want their character crossing over to NBC. Anderson held firm. He won. In his personal life, he was a man of quiet elegance. He collected vintage automobiles, including a 1957 Bentley Continental flying spur. He was an avid tennis player and a generous patron of the arts. Lee Majors called him Old Money for his bearing and his class. Before the Bionic franchise, he had worked with Kubrick on Paths of Glory, appeared in Forbidden Planet, and starred in 7 Days in May. He was married twice. His marriage to Catherine Thalberg, daughter of the legendary MGM producer Irving Thalberg, gave him 3 daughters. One of them, Brooke Anderson, went on to become a U.S. diplomat and ambassador to the United Nations. The Oscar Goldman action figure, complete with exploding briefcase, sold in the millions. On August 31, 2017, Richard Anderson passed away at his home in Beverly Hills. He was 91. "He was a dear and devoted friend, and I never met anyone quite like him," Lee Majors said. Oscar Goldman outlasted all his bionic heroes. Number 6. Jennifer Darling as Peggy Callahan. Jennifer Darling played Peggy Callahan, Oscar Goldman's secretary, and became one of the most consistent presences across the entire bionic franchise. She was 27 when she stepped into the role of Goldman's loyal, warm-hearted assistant. Peggy wasn't the lead, but her face was there every season, a note of normalcy amid secret missions and government conspiracies. What made Darling's situation unique? She appeared as Peggy in both The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman, even after the latter moved from ABC to NBC. That required separate negotiations between the studios, but audiences got the continuity they had come to count on. Alongside the Bionic shows, she was a regular on 8 is Enough, and then came her second career, in voice acting. Irma in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 1988 to 1994. Ayeka in Tenchi Muyo. Additional voices in The Iron Giant, Monsters, Inc., Tarzan, and productions for Disney and Pixar. The list goes on. Jennifer Darling has accompanied the childhoods of multiple generations through her voice work alone. Born in Pittsburgh on June 19, 1946, she was dancing at 3 years old and singing on television at 14. She graduated from Carnegie Mellon University. She was married to Paul Itkin, whom she met during her college years. In 2026, Jennifer Darling is 79 years old. Her Peggy Callahan smiled at audiences for 5 seasons, and her voice work has lived on for decades. Not every legend has a bionic arm. Some just show up, do the work, and create characters people love without end. Number 7, Lindsay Wagner as Jaime Summers. Lindsay Wagner came to The $6 Million Man in 1975 as Jaime Summers, a professional tennis player, Steve Austin's girlfriend, and a crash survivor who receives a bionic body of her own. Wagner was 25, and a role conceived as a guest appearance ended up reshaping the entire franchise. When her character died at the end of a 2-part episode, the network was buried in viewer mail. The producers brought Jaime back, declaring her death a cover story for a secret recovery. In 1976, The Bionic Woman launched as a spin-off and became a hit in its own right. In 1977, Wagner won the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series, the first actress to receive that award for a role in a science fiction show. Here's what most people don't know. She almost turned the part down. She took it as a gift for her half-sister Randy, whose favorite show was The $6 Million Man. One act of kindness, and she became an icon for a generation. 4 marriages, 4 divorces. With her third husband, stuntman Henry Kingi, she has 2 sons. In the 1990s, she spoke openly about chronic health struggles, immersed herself in holistic medicine and wellness, wrote books on health, and led mindfulness seminars. In 2016, she drew criticism for publicly endorsing a questionable treatment for chronic hives, but none of it diminished the affection the bionic fan community holds for her. In 2026, Lindsay Wagner is 76. She participates in retrospectives and fan events. Jaime Summers was one of the first genuinely strong women in American primetime television. Wagner remains her living embodiment. Number 8. Monte Markham as Barney Miller/Barney Hiller. Monte Markham appeared in The $6 Million Man in one of the series' most beloved storylines. As the second bionic man, a soldier whose mind couldn't handle what had been done to him, and who became Steve Austin's most compelling adversary. Markham was around 40 at the time. His fractured, desperate performance stayed with viewers for years. The character was originally named Barney Miller, but shortly after the episode aired on ABC, a hugely popular sitcom debuted with that exact title. So, in the character's second appearance, his last name was quietly changed to Hiller to avoid confusion. These things only happen in television, what almost no one knows. Monte Markham was the original first choice to play Steve Austin himself, but at the time of casting, he was locked into the lead role on the new Perry Mason, 1973 to 1974, and simply wasn't available. The role went to Lee Majors instead. The man who nearly was Steve Austin, by a twist of scheduling, ended up playing his dark mirror. That's almost too fitting to be coincidence. After the bionic shows, Markham worked steadily for decades. Dallas, Remington Steele, Melrose Place, and many others. A long, solid career. Not a superstar trajectory, but a record of consistent professional respect. In 2026, Monte Markham is 89 years old. He has a double claim on this show's history, as the lead who almost was, and as the author of the best villain performance the series ever had. Sometimes Plan B is better than Plan A. Number 9, William Shatner in guest appearances. William Shatner appeared in several episodes of The $6 Million Man in the mid-1970s. He was around 44 at the time. With Star Trek off the air as a series, Shatner was keeping busy in television while the next chapter of his career took shape. And it wasn't far off. In 1979, Star Trek the Motion Picture arrived, and Captain Kirk was back on the big screen. 5 more films followed. Between 2004 and 2008, Boston Legal earned him an Emmy and a Golden Globe, and then the peak of everything. In October 2021, at the age of 90, William Shatner became the oldest person ever to travel to space. He flew on a Blue Origin vehicle and came back in tears. "It was the most profound experience I could have imagined," he said. Captain Kirk, in actual space, half a century after the fictional version. In 2026, William Shatner is 94. He writes books, gives interviews, appears at conventions. His guest role on The Bionic Show is a small thread in an endless tapestry. But that's how the mosaic of a golden era gets made. Number 10, John Delancey in a guest appearance. John Delancey appeared in The $6 Million Man in a small role in the mid-1970s. Very young, very early in his career. He was barely into his 20s. It was one of his first Hollywood credits, long before his name became synonymous with science fiction. In 1987, he played Q in Star Trek: The Next Generation, an omnipotent, razor-sharp, and utterly unpredictable being from the Q continuum, a role he carried into Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Strange New Worlds, and other entries in the franchise across nearly 4 decades. Q became the defining template for the charismatic trickster in American science fiction. Delancey trained at a conservatory theater program. His voice, his timing, his ability to project absolute arrogance alongside a barely concealed attachment to the humans he torments, that comes from years of stage discipline. In his personal life, he was married twice, and he has spoken openly about the ways playing Q shaped his own sense of identity. In 2026, John Delancey is 71. He remains deeply engaged with the Star Trek fan community, from a tiny guest credit on a 1970s action hit to the status of a living legend. Not every journey looks that good. Number 11. Lee Majors II in the reunion movies. Lee Majors Jr., the son of the show's star, appeared in all 3 reunion movies: The Return of the $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman, 1987, Bionic Showdown, 1989, and Bionic Ever After, 1994. He was around 25 in the first of them. He played OSY agent Jim Castilian, a capable field operative who accompanied the heroes through all 3 films. Not a bionic, just a human being standing alongside legends. And somehow, that felt entirely right, especially when the human being was standing next to his own father. He was credited on screen as Lee Majors II, which is itself a document of paternity and continuity. And near the end of the first reunion movie, his character says to Steve Austin, "I'd like to have a father like you." That wasn't just a line. Everyone on that set knew exactly what it meant. His story starts with loss. When his mother left Lee Majors in 1964, the boy was 2 years old. He grew up without his father's consistent presence. Years later, they stood in front of cameras together. Outside the reunion films, Majors II continued working in smaller projects through the 1990s, never chasing the same level of fame his father had. A deliberate choice to live on his own terms. In 2026, he is 63 years old. His place in the Bionic story is singular, the only person who ever shared that screen with his father in this universe, and did it with complete dignity. Number 12, Sandra Bullock as Kate Mason. Yes, really. Sandra Bullock appeared in the Bionic universe in the 1989 reunion film Bionic Showdown, playing Kate Mason, a young woman who has used a wheelchair since childhood due to a congenital muscular condition, and who becomes the newest bionic human. She was 24. It was one of her first notable roles, years before her career went global. What happened next, everyone knows. Speed, 1994. Worldwide fame overnight. Miss Congeniality, 2000. Crash, 2004. The Blind Side, 2009. The Academy Award for Best Actress. Her films have earned more than $5 billion at the worldwide box office. In 2010, her then-husband Jesse James was found to have been unfaithful. The story dominated front pages around the world. She filed for divorce, adopted 2 children, and rebuilt her life with remarkable grace. In 2026, Sandra Bullock is 61. After several years stepping back from active film work, she is focused on her family. But her footprint in the bionic world is real. A small role in 1989 was the first step towards superstardom. That's just worth knowing. Number 13. Farrah Fawcett and her connection to the bionic universe. Farrah Fawcett never appeared in The $6 Million Man as an actress, but she was part of that world in another way. From 1973 to 1982, she was married to Lee Majors, and in 1976, something genuinely unprecedented happened. Lee Majors on The $6 Million Man and Farrah Fawcett on Charlie's Angels were topping the ABC ratings simultaneously. Husband and wife dominating primetime on 2 different shows at the same time. What everyone knows. The 1976 poster of Farrah in the red swimsuit is the best-selling celebrity poster in American entertainment history. More than 12 million copies. It still is. What fewer people remember, Farrah traveled a long road from beautiful face to serious actress. Her 1984 TV movie, The Burning Bed, about domestic violence, earned genuine critical recognition. It was a role that put everything she'd built as an image on the line. On June 25, 2009, Farrah Fawcett died of anal cancer. She was 62. Michael Jackson died the same day, and her passing was largely overtaken by the media storm that followed. Their story, hers and Lee Majors, isn't just the marriage of 2 superstars. It's a story about love that doesn't fit into simple explanations. Number 14. Elizabeth Montgomery in a guest appearance. Elizabeth Montgomery, the star of Bewitched, 1964 to 1972, where she played witch Samantha Stevens, appeared in The $6 Million Man as a guest in one of its episodes. She was around 42 or 43 at the time. After Bewitched ended, she actively sought out varied work, and the science fiction genre offered exactly that. Off-screen, Montgomery was considerably more outspoken than her image as America's beloved TV housewife might have suggested. She was publicly vocal about civil rights and women's rights at a time when doing so carried real personal cost. In 1985, she starred in a TV movie about a young man murdered because of his sexual orientation. She took that role with the conviction of an activist, not just a performer. Her private life was complicated. 4 marriages, a long and difficult relationship with director William Asher. But behind the warm, domestic image on screen was a woman with firm convictions and the willingness to stand behind them. On May 18, 1995, Elizabeth Montgomery died of colon cancer. She was 62. She had kept her diagnosis private almost to the very end. The country was genuinely shaken. Her guest appearance on The Bionic Show is a small brushstroke in the portrait of a woman who was always larger than any single role. Number 15. Lee Majors as Colonel Steve Austin. And here we arrive at the center of everything. Lee Majors is not just part of the $6 Million Man. In many ways, he is the $6 Million Man. He is the face, the body, the voice, and the emotional center of the entire franchise. He is the only person present in all 108 episodes, all 3 1973 pilot movies, and all 3 reunion films. No other actor is tied to the mythology of the series as completely as he is. When he first put on the identity of Colonel Steve Austin in 1973, he was 34 years old, still young enough to carry the physical demands of an action hero, but already experienced enough to give the role weight. He lived inside that character for more than 5 consecutive years, through television films, weekly episodes, crossover stories, merchandising, public appearances, and a level of fame that turned Steve Austin into one of the defining pop culture figures of the 1970s. But Lee Majors' story begins long before the Bionic franchise, and it is considerably darker than anything you might imagine while watching The Invincible Man on screen. Behind the calm confidence, the controlled stare, and the image of a hero rebuilt by science, there was a childhood marked by sudden loss, instability, and emotional absence. He was born Harvey Lee Yeary on April 23, 1939, in Wyandotte, Michigan. His father died in an industrial accident before he was even born, which meant Lee entered the world already carrying the shadow of a man he would never meet. Then, when he was roughly 17 months old, his mother was killed in a car accident. In less than 2 years, he had lost both parents. The orphan boy went to live with an aunt and uncle named Yeary, who raised him and gave him the family structure he otherwise would not have had. That beginning matters because it adds another layer to the man audiences later saw on television. Steve Austin was a man who had been broken and rebuilt. Lee Majors, in a very different way, had lived his own version of that story long before Hollywood ever gave him the role. When he was grown and choosing a stage name, he took the name Majors, in honor of Johnny Majors, a football player and coach at the University of Tennessee who had been a boyhood idol. The family that raised him had a different name. Majors was his own choice, made out of admiration, identity, and respect. It was not just a professional name, it was a reinvention. From Harvey Lee Yeary, the orphaned boy from Michigan, to Lee Majors, the man who would one day become one of the most recognizable television stars in America. From Loss to the screens of an entire nation. His first major role came in The Big Valley from 1965 to 1969, where he played Heath Barkley. It was an important break, not only because it put him in front of a national audience, but because it placed him beside Barbara Stanwyck, one of the great actresses of classic Hollywood. Stanwyck herself took him under her wing and taught him the craft with the directness of an old-school professional. Be on time, know your lines, hit your mark, and keep your mouth shut, he remembered her telling him. It was simple advice, but it shaped the kind of actor he became. Disciplined, reliable, physically present, and never bigger than the work. That discipline carried him into The $6 Million Man. The role of Colonel Steve Austin could easily have become a flat superhero fantasy. A man with mechanical strength, enhanced vision, and impossible speed. But Majors gave him something more grounded. He played him not as a machine, but as a wounded man trying to live with what had been done to him. That was the emotional key of the series. The audience did not only watch him run faster or jump higher, they watched a man who had survived catastrophe and was trying to make his survival mean something. After The $6 Million Man, many actors might have been trapped forever inside one role. But Lee Majors managed something rare. He found another hit, The Fall Guy, which ran from 1981 to 1986, gave him a completely different kind of television immortality. As Colt Seavers, he was no longer the bionic man, but a stuntman, bounty hunter, and working-class action hero with humor, charm, and bruised charisma. Across 3 different decades, he became part of 3 landmark shows, The Big Valley, The $6 Million Man, and The Fall Guy. That kind of longevity is not luck alone. It requires timing, toughness, and the ability to remain believable as the world around you changes. His personal life was also watched closely, especially during the height of his fame. He was married 4 times. His first marriage was to Kathy Robinson from 1961 to 1964, and they had 1 son, Lee Majors II, who would later appear in the reunion movies connected to The $6 Million Man. His second marriage was to the legendary Farrah Fawcett from 1973 to 1982, his most famous marriage, and one of the most photographed celebrity relationships of the 1970s. At the time, they seemed like the perfect television-era couple, the bionic man and the angel. But fame, distance, work schedules, and public pressure made that life far more complicated than the image suggested. His third marriage was to Karen Velez from 1988 to 1994. Together, they had 3 children, including twins. Then, in 2002, he married Faith Noel Cross, his current wife. Their marriage has lasted for more than 2 decades, a quieter and more stable chapter after years spent under the heat of television fame. He lives with her in Houston, Texas, far from the constant machinery of Hollywood. His life has also included serious health challenges. In 2003, he underwent open heart surgery for coronary bypass, a reminder that even the man forever associated with strength, technology, and survival was still human. The image of Steve Austin may have been better, stronger, faster, but Lee Majors himself had to face the same vulnerabilities as anyone else: age, illness, recovery, and the knowledge that the body eventually makes its own demands. In 2024, the release of The Fall Guy starring Ryan Gosling, based on his own series, brought a new wave of attention to his name from a generation that had not been there the first time around. For older viewers, it was a reminder of the man who had once carried the original show. For younger viewers, it was an introduction to a television legacy they may have only known by reference. That is the strange gift of pop culture. Sometimes a role returns decades later and places the original star back into the conversation. In 2026, Lee Majors is 87 years old. He is alive, he is with his wife, and he remembers all of it. The orphan baby from Michigan, the young actor learning discipline from Barbara Stanwyck, the television star of the 1970s, the man who became Steve Austin, the husband, the father, the survivor, a man assembled from loss, then rebuilt through work, persistence, and reinvention. Better, stronger, faster. That is not just the slogan of a television hero. In Lee Majors' case, it almost sounds like a biography. And maybe that is exactly how a good story should end. The $6 Million Man was never just entertainment. It was a mirror of its era, a time when people believed in science and in the idea that technology could make human beings more than they were. The actors who built that world moved through victories and losses, illness and scandal, love and heartbreak. Some of them are gone. Martin Balsam, Darren McGavin, Martin E. Brooks, Richard Anderson, Elizabeth Montgomery, Farrah Fawcett. They're no longer here, but the work remains. And Lee Majors, Lindsay Wagner, Alan Oppenheimer, William Shatner, Jennifer Darling, John Delancey, they're still with us. And that in itself is something close to a miracle. If you grew up with that electronic sound and that slow motion run across the desert, drop a comment and tell us which character was your favorite and what from this video surprised you the most. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are a lot more stories coming about the people who made television's golden age. Because behind every image on screen is a real human being with their own pain, their own joy, and their own irreplaceable story.